Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics, brought to you by Sketch.com. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guests are part of the Three Worlds, Three Moons team over on Substack. It's the Mikes, Mike Del Mundo and Mike Huddleston. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So we're talking on Wednesday, April 6th. Normally when I'm talking to somebody on this podcast, I have a general idea of kind of what they're working on. What have you two been up to today? I'm interested in how this has changed. Huddleston, we'll start with you.
Let's see. Well, right now we're ramping up to getting our first print stuff out for the Three Worlds, Three Moons. So this week has been covers. I've been doing a few covers, wrapping up a variant cover for one of our books right now. So my week's been a lot of just getting files in, getting files cleaned up, organizing stuff with our editor, and trying to get a fair amount of creative work done, at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, that's it so far this week.
What about you, Del Mundo?
I took half the day to do the a process post. So like you said, you're really into our process stuff. So that actually takes up a long time. I don't know if it takes you that long, Mike, but it took me about 3 hours just.
Oh yeah, it's a long process. Mostly because I'm not really used to writing for other to read, and writing about my process. Most of that stuff I've never even thought about before. So spelling it all out and trying to make it intelligible to people. It takes a while. And then I'm like, would you guys please read this before it goes out to make sure I don't sound, like an idiot?
Yeah. Thank God we have Jonathan and Steve. Now we have Steve Wacker to really go through it, make sure we sound pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that was half the day, and then this is the next half. So this is an added on. It's brand new, especially working for Three Worlds, Three Moons. It's comics, but then there's a lot of other stuff too, like process posts, and I will get into it, but a lot of logistics involved.
I do think that's one of the interesting things is that, like you said, it is comics. But there's also all this other stuff. There's it's not just you doing the work. You also have to talk about it and build a community. You do your process write-ups and you participate in live streams. I mean, live streams you're working during, but at the same time, it's probably not working the same way you normally would.
Yeah, I do it. I mean, it's fun, but it's also, like you said, you listening to a podcast and trying to work at your advertising agency. It's just hard to kind of hear two things at once. And it's the same with drawing. Live draws is trying to answer questions and draw, but it's not just drawing anything. It's where I'm actually drawing something to do with work. So yeah, it's hard, but it's fun at the same time. I'm just trying to get better at it, I guess, as I go.
Well, there's also you guys did the recent watch of Annihilation, amongst other things. There's all kinds of things you guys are doing. Do you two enjoy the elements outside of the art as well, or does that have its own learning curve?
Well, I haven't done a live art thing yet because I'm just not comfortable yet working on really professional stuff in front of people. So that's a stress for me. But everything else, watching movies with our subscribers and doing process posts and things like that, that's been fun. It has been a real learning curve of just now you're directly interacting with people, not through, I'm putting art out and then having some sort of, extended contact with people. This is direct and immediate. And that's been really different to try to figure out just how to do that in a good way.
I think one of the interesting things is Del Mundo, you haven't done, you've not done a creator-owned project before this, right?
No, this is the first one. Yeah.
And Huddleston, you've done you've done Decorum most recently, but you've done other ones too.
Yeah.
People always say that creator-owned projects, people I talk to say that creator-owned projects are like running a small business. And I feel like this is kind of that on steroids.
It definitely is. If you're publishing your book through Image or something like that, you're kind of just running, your own, publishing anyway, and just Image is the outlet, that puts it in stores. But this is a completely different animal, and the conversations that Mike and I are a part of now, as far as picking printers and, talking about, how we're handling things for conventions and scheduling, at the beginning, before Steve came on, we were, kind of editors. We were picking artists and scheduling things and getting, contracts out to people and scripts. And it was just so far and beyond like just doing the art. So this is the most businessy business, I've been involved in.
Are you loving it, Del Mundo?
I'm loving. I think I can speak for Mike, and we're both loving it that Steve Wacker is
yes.
is finally editing our stuff. Because it's different. You're an artist. You want to just do art, and that's the fun part of it. And then it's awesome to get your friends, like your artist friends, to come and work on like these stories. But it's also a little anxiety driven when you have to ask them for work or ask them when things are going to be done. You don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
Especially, yeah. So that's the editor's job, and it's great now. It was just an extra job that we had to do before that. I don't think that would have lasted forever. Yeah.
It does seem, that's one of the things I think is really interesting is like, I don't remember which comic it was on, but somebody had made this or asked this question is like, would any of these ever, or when will one of these be credited to Jonathan Hickman as the writer? And Steve Wacker responded with like, that's just not how it is. Basically, it's like Three Worlds, Three Moons is you three. You guys are credited as a group. That's one of the interesting things is from the jump. It's like, Huddleston, when you're working on Decorum, it's like I imagine for the most part, you were just drawing. You were just coming up with ideas and you were drawing the pages. Or like, Del Mundo, for you, when you were last working on Immortal Hulk, like the threshing place for interiors, same thing. It's like, you're doing the job. That was like your job. Now it feels like, or at least initially, it sounds like you were kind of finding that there was all these other jobs. And thankfully, you have Steve on hand now to kind of take a lot of those jobs away.
Yeah, when I was working with Jonathan on, this is kind of an extension of how we worked together on Decorum. And I think Mike is coming in, and because I know we had conversations between Mike and I at the very beginning of just how much leeway do you have? And I was telling him, like, when I worked with Jonathan on Decorum, we were working in Marvel style. So it was a pretty small script, for the number of pages that had to be done. And I would just constantly pitch him any crazy idea in the world of like, how about I do this? How about this character becomes this thing? And he would just say yes all the time. And so there was an amount of content creation and not writing, but as far as contributing to actually what is going on the page,
right?
That, he just threw the door open for me to do that. And we're absolutely doing it in this, where they give us a script first and then we just riff like crazy on the designs, and then they go back and go, okay, well, now we're integrating all this crazy shit that you guys drew into what's going out to the artist. So, I would never say that we're co-writing anything, but we're doing more than just getting a script and just, drawing pictures to it.
Yeah, it's hard to do that, to just draw the pictures, because once we start drawing the pictures, you just automatically just get all sorts of ideas like, oh, this character could be this and that, and you actually start creating stories around these characters.
Yeah,
that's the process pretty much.
You had this thing in one of your process pieces, Del Mundo, about the jump off that I thought was really interesting. It's like how you find your inspiration for your work in the process. It was the process piece for assessment. And you said it was basically like you'd find some sort of image. Like in this case, it was like old polo outfits. And like you look at all that stuff, and that it would be kind of how you get through the jitters in the beginning of designing and everything like that. And, do you ever run into a situation kind of like that where it's like you're designing this stuff and it's almost like a jump off for you to want to get into the story, but then you have to hand it off to somebody else?
I get very married to the concepts, where I'm just like, man, like you start visualizing things, and you do get like, yeah, you fall in love with the characters that you do, and then you do start creating the stories. So yeah, I do get once in a while, I'm like, I'm jealous for whoever's gonna, draw this story.
What about you, Huddleston?
Yeah, I think the only thing that really ever holds me back is because there's often where I'm like, shit, I wish I I was the one who got to draw this. But then I remember how much work it is to draw these pages. And I'm like, It's okay. It's okay that someone else has drawn this, and I'll go on and design characters for the next one. So, I mean, we've got some stuff coming up where Mike and I are working on bigger Three Worlds, Three Moons projects that are just going to be ours. So there's going to be time for us to do pages. But yeah, I do have that feeling where I'm like, man, I wish I was drawing this little like 8-page story.
Mundo, you did Rudolph the Gator Sloth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you did Rudolph the Gator Sloth. Huddleston, you did the Vojaganto, the space whale. You know, those ones, I love those. Those are two of my favorite things. It's weird. I feel like animals keep showing up as conveyance in this universe, which I think is really fascinating. I totally support it. Like, there's at least there's 2 times there where we've had animals as conveyance, but I really love both of those things. But it's really interesting looking at your designs, because I think back to talking to artists who have said that like they designed a costume for a character in like a superhero book, and then afterwards they regretted designing it as well as they did because it was so like ornate and like kind of like there's so much to it that they have to keep drawing it every time. They're like, I wish that I had done less. That's one nice thing is like Rudolph the Gator Sloth in particular has so many details to it that you thought out, Domundo, that it's just like there's a part of you that probably was like, I'm happy that I did such a good job, but I'm also glad I don't have to draw this guy over and over again.
Actually, I think I would have been happy, like had fun with Rudolph the Gator Sloth. It was the other characters that I drew in there that I was like, yeah, why did I felt bad for whoever was getting the story. It wasn't too bad, but actually, yeah, Valentine did the story for us. And when he redrew the concepts that I did, he actually simplified it a bit more, and that was actually perfect for me. Like I thought it was too detailed, like my concepts. So when he did it, it streamlined it and it was perfect. So sometimes it works out that way. But yeah, Rudolph the Gator Sloth, I was like, I actually, when I was drawing that, I came up with like a whole like full out short story for it, and I was like, we got to revisit this later, and hopefully we can bring that up.
You should pitch that short story.
Yeah, there's so many characters, like the whale that Mike drew. There's so we're just showing what they're used for, but you could do a full out backstory of like how these animals came about, like how they figured out how to use these whales as transport and stuff like that. So I feel like, yeah, that'd be great for revisiting, like an animal book or something like that. Animal source book for Three Worlds.
I would be all about that.
I would be into that.
Yeah.
I am interested in how your designs end up kind of evolving. Because one thing, I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat for like reading Transit, and I was like, one thing I really loved in Transit was like the data pages explaining the Vojagantos, the space whales, and like how there was like the explanation as to how there's like this symbiotic relationship between the humans that live in the cities on the back of the whales and how they mine the crystals for power, which provides relief for the whales. And it was interesting reading your process piece, Huddleston, because you were talking about how in the design that you imagined that they would get these space crystals kind of like barnacles, like just through the navigation of space.
Right.
I have no idea if this is the case, but was that like symbiotic relationship already in the plan, or is that something that stemmed from your design and you guys all just kind of flowed off of that?
That came after the design.
Really?
Yeah. Like I'm trying to remember exactly what the very basic idea was. But yeah, the thing with the crystals and the build up and using them for navigation, that was just something that I came up with when I'm designing stuff. I sometimes I get too involved in like whatever the internal logic is, even for something as crazy, as a whale flying through, dark matter fields in space. But that's the thing that I was talking about, where we're really getting to pitch in like much more than just, can you give us a cool picture of something we've already concepted? We're co-concepting everything, as it goes. And that's the best part about this project. It's really spoiling when you're like, oh, my ideas just go, it's like this game of ping pong where like they throw you something and you riff on it and throw it back, and then they take that, and then that's what ends up going into the script. So that's really, for me, that's the best part of all this.
Yeah, mine too. It's been, I don't think we've had any sorts of like we should go back and fix this and fix that. Most of our designs just go right through. It's pretty awesome. It's very spoiling too. Yeah.
I mean, that's the interesting thing is, I think one of the interesting things about Three Worlds, Three Moons is that in some ways it's kind of hard to explain. It's like when you say a concept jam universe or whatever you want to phrase it as, you know, for some people on the outside, it's just like, it doesn't have that obvious shape or like that elevator pitch. It's not like this is, I don't know, I'm going to think of the first, like, Anaconda meets Star Wars. God, what the hell would that movie be like? Anyways, it's not like, you know, something like that where it's really easy to figure out. It's just you all riffing and then kind of building this story and universe out of that. But I think that's the cool thing, right? Is like, that's the jam right there. That's where, you know, one of the two of you can come up with an idea. And then next thing you know, that idea completely shifts what the concept of that space whale was. Or maybe it like completely shifts how much Rudolph the Gator Sloth is going to show up, because holy shit, Rudolph the Gator Sloth looks amazing. That type of stuff can, I don't know, it makes me kind of think of in Saga, like when Fiona Staples designed Goose, the little like cute seal guy. Initially, that character wasn't going to show up a lot, but then Brian K. Vaughan saw it and was like, oh my God, we got to have this character more because it is amazing. And it seems like it would be really amazing for the two of you, because not only is your input really informing everything about this universe, but it's also changing it on the fly.
Yeah, and I think that's just a real credit to Jonathan, is, you know, he is not, you know, coming in going, I'm the wordsmith here and I'm going to define what everything is and your ideas, you know, aren't needed. He's entirely just whatever you guys throw out there, you know, I'm going to take it in and just, you know, dance around that and make that part of the thing. Not every writer I've worked with has been someone who's interested in that. So it is really spoiling, but I think it makes everything much more. I think you're a smart creator if you know to take good ideas from wherever they show up. You know, he gets to kind of just take credit for how things turn out great. He's just like, yeah, like, look at all this great stuff I came up with.
Yeah, Jonathan's awesome. His descriptions are pretty loose. So there's a lot of room to play with.
It's a lot of fun working this way.
Obviously, Huddleston, you were working with him on Decorum. I know that he said, he told me on the podcast that you all met through Scotty Young, I want to say.
Yeah.
How did you pair up for this? Like, was the original version of Three Worlds, Three Moons going to be like this? Or was it a little bit smaller before? Did it kind of build up to this?
Mike, I think you know more than me. I showed up kind of, I feel like, at the last minute for this.
Man, it's a long story. I don't know if Jonathan would want us to talk about it, but it was Jonathan hit me up to do this concept universe. To be honest, when you said like I didn't really understand the whole concept universe thing, I still didn't really understand until we started to like actually really get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he hit me up and he was like, it was brand new. He was just like, we want you to basically conceptualize the whole universe. And then he pretty much brought up Mike Huddleston and was like, what do you think of Mike coming in? And I was like, that'd be awesome, man. Like a tag team kind of thing. I've always been a fan of Mike's work since Butcher Baker. And I was like, I have no haps about it, you know what I mean? And man, it's been so long. I think that's pretty much how it went. And he just hit up Mike, and then we just got onto meetings. And it was actually a blessing in disguise, because when I think about it now, like if I was the only one designing this universe, I would be like, there's just be no way. It's just such a monster. It needs more than one artist to go about things. So
it's a ton of work. If you had to do it by yourself, it would be intimidating.
Yeah, and the awesome part of it is I feed off of Mike's designs. Like, so when he does something, I'll look at it and subconsciously or on purpose, I'll be like, well, look at those cool rings around the ankles of one of his designs. And I'm just like, I'm going to put that on this character because they're brother and sister. And then that's how it kind of goes back and forth. And then also, you know, when sometimes I see his designs, I'm like, fuck, I gotta put my game up. You know what I mean? Like,
I know
That
this is
would, that
getting
would
away.
happen with just one guy. Yeah.
I know this is getting away from your answer, like how
No,
to
that's fine.
together, but what Mike's saying there is that happens every time. He turns designs in, or he'll turn a cover in, and I'm just like, shit. I'm like, I gotta bring my game up to turn something in, at the same time that this guy's turning stuff in, because some design will just be amazing, or some cover will just blow me out of the water, and I'm like, okay, I gotta hit this next one harder. So having that sort of friendly, I mean, the most friendly version of being competitive,
Yeah.
it's really great. Like, and it really, I think it pushes both of us. I know I'm having to think harder about my designs and trying to make stuff more imaginative, and fun, just working with Mike. So it's been really cool.
Yeah. Likewise, man. It's pretty much the same. I think Jonathan he had that plan that from the very start. He's gonna put these guys.
Yeah, it's a good plan.
Yeah.
And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. Macroverse is a next-generation digital comics platform, and one with an astonishing number of comics, with currently over 50 series from over 100 creators on their app, with a 5-star rating both on Apple and Google's app stores. Download the app and binge all their titles, including the Eisner-nominated Remind from Jason Brubaker, Lisa K. Weber's Hex 11, which has been described as Harry Potter meets Blade Runner, or the new queer supernatural adventure series Husk that launches on November 1st. It's just $4.99 a month to subscribe to Macroverse, with proceeds directly supporting the creators on the platform. Keep an eye on the future of Macroverse 2, as 2022 is going to bring an epic upgrade that offers a new level of digital collectability and more, with early adopters able to sign up for more information at macroverse.com. And now, back to the show. I do think it's funny. I mean, I'm trying to remember what the post was. It was something like what the artists are drawing or something like that. It was explaining what you guys had to design for runes and then for mining, I think it was. And it was crazy seeing all the different things that you have to like kind of put in there. And it is interesting to think about that. Those are like the very obvious things, like character designs or like space whales or Rudolph the Gator Sloth and stuff like that. That's one of the things I like in the process pieces is when you get into like the weeds on like the details that you kind of build in there because they mean something to you. Like Huddleston, you had the in the process job for the job, you had the emergency medical kit and like how that works.
Right.
I imagine, no offense, I imagine most people didn't care. I saw that and I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. I was just like, it's so cool to see how that works. Or like Del Mundo, when you did the breathing apparatus that Tayo Villar would use to survive when he was lost, like details and mechanics like those are so cool to see you develop. And it seems like you can really get into the weeds and like not just think this is a thing that has a practical application, but like you can put this in there because it enriches the world. Like, is that something you guys enjoy digging into?
Yeah. I mean, thank you for noticing those things. I don't like sometimes like me and Mike everything we do is like to the detail. Like when we read a script, if someone's carrying a pen, we've got to design that pen.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be like, our version of a pen that would be in our world or whatever. And for the most part, we're just doing it for ourselves because we just get into the story and we have to design everything because this is our universe. We've kind of like owned it, me and Mike. And for you to say that, it's pretty awesome. It's good to hear because that's no one's really paying attention to those things.
I love the idea that Huddleston is like the hospital guy now.
Yeah, I had to ask at one point. I'm like, I don't want to design a script that has another hospital room in it. I've done a couple of these, and again, because like if you take these things seriously, and you're like, hey, you need to design a hospital for an alien civilization on a brand new planet, that's a job,
right?
You're like, okay, well, it's got to read as a hospital room, but this is an alien planet. Like nothing in there can be recognizable. And, it's not like I have a real expertise in doing any sort of, interior design or anything like that. So if you take it seriously, it's a pain to try to get it right. And yeah, I don't want to draw any more hospitals if that's possible. But I think what I'm always trying to do, and I started doing this on Decorum, is like you really want any universe that you're presenting to feel like, the audience is seeing this little story that's happening, but you want it to feel like that universe just spills out in every direction, outside of what they're watching. And those details, that I think that's what really sells it. If you've developed that car and that building and the fashion and all that stuff, or even just these 8 pages, it feels like a much bigger universe. So hopefully, even if the reader isn't consciously caring about what this pen design looks like, the fact that there's so many designs in there, hopefully it's just making them subconsciously feel like they're visiting a real place.
Yeah. I mean, it's like with In Transit. I love Transit. I thought that was incredible. Also, I just want to give you guys, just let you know, I had Christian Ward come on the podcast right after that came out, and I asked him about it, and he was just like in love with it, I think, because
Oh, awesome.
I think he described it as like the easiest job he's ever done, because he just came in and he's like, Huddleston had all these designs for me, so I just had to like draw it, and it was incredible. I thought that like one thing that you did in there, Huddleston, was really impressive, is that it's those details you're talking about. It's like the grandfather of the little girl, you had him have this like robotic arm, like and that arm, as you said in your write-up, implies history. And that's one of the things I think is really cool about the design and the world building that you have to do is it really is storytelling. It's like the type of thing that, like you said, it's like you put in this one thing, but then it kind of maybe it never becomes more than a pen, or maybe it never becomes more than an arm, but it could. It opens up all these opportunities. And that's where the magic is, I think, in 3 Worlds, 3 Moons.
Well, and one thing that's going to happen is, since we're putting the source book together, that's going to have all of these short stories and most of our design work in it. I think in the future, if we have other creators come in and write and draw stuff for this, all of these, pen designs and hospital designs and all this stuff are going to be, in a book that's now a reference book for anyone else that wants to come in and do stuff in this universe. So even if we never immediately run off and tell like a story of, the farmer grandfather and how he lost his arm and all that all that stuff is in there if anyone wants to, pick it up and run with it. So I think there's a double use for this stuff, even if it doesn't get used right now.
I do want to say one thing I think is really charming about all this is I read Runes. In Runes, there's the moment where, Del Mundo, you have the guy's face peeling off in Runes, and it was just like, I don't know, I had like this weird mix of emotions about it. I was both like extremely hyped by it, but also haunted by it. It was, I was very conflicted, but it was kind of cool because like you could just go down into the comments, and Huddleston, you were in there, just somebody made a comment about how awesome it was, that moment when the face was peeling off, and you're just like, I was blown away when I saw it. And that's one of the cool things is it seems like having another artist on board allows you to gives you somebody to riff with or be inspired by or talk to or do whatever. And that probably makes it a lot easier beyond just like splitting the work.
Yeah, no, it's awesome, man. I've never experienced it actually. Like most of the time I'm just at home, just drawing by myself. And this is like actually the first time where I'm really collaborating with another artist. And it's been awesome, man. Just lots of inspiration. Even like with Mike, he has certain, interests, probably different interests than me. So when he sends me like what do you call it, visual references that he has, like stuff that I would never be exposed to, that helps me a lot too, because I get into those things as well. So stuff like that's awesome as well. Yeah.
The one other thing where I think it aids both of us is when we're having our like in company Zoom meetings, we actually, we are the art department. So when we're, when the pressure is, going back and forth between editorial or getting writing done or whatever, it's like we have a little bit of a unified front of just like, hey, the art department needs this much time, or the art department can do this. So that's another thing where it's like, okay, it's good to have each other's back in this, because there's so much work that needs to be done. It's not only is it good to split, it's good to have like we are a unified front in this, so I think that helps.
Yeah, we're definitely always in agreement.
Yeah.
Do you actually call yourselves the art department?
I mean, we haven't. I may start now. That sounds pretty good.
I do like it. I do like it. I want to ask about how different this is. You know, so far you've predominantly done design and world building work for Three Worlds, Three Moons, at least as far as we've seen. I mean, that's one of the interesting things is like, I think that because we're seeing so much process and because we're seeing so much behind the scenes stuff, I think it could be easy to assume that this is like all that's going on or something like that. That like, you know, there isn't a roadmap. I imagine that's not the case. I imagine that there's a lot under the water and the glacier that we can't see. Is that the case?
Yeah, it's not the case. I mean, we're just constantly planning, just constantly planning for like the future. The cool thing about these short stories and the process is before we even start doing like our like long stories, there's already like a big idea of like what the world's going to be just through our source book.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first started doing it, I didn't really know where we were going, but now I'm like, man, I have a pretty crazy idea of what our universe is like, especially with all the elements. So it's kind of cool, like how it starts that way instead of you just trying to figure it out during like a long form book.
Yeah, there's a lot going on as far as different books that are being planned or started. You know, the publishing plan is pretty aggressive, and Jonathan may be really open to taking our ideas, you know, for design and working it into story. But when it comes to like big planning, overarching universe stuff, like he's not, you know, just winging that. Like he definitely has like a big plan of like what he's putting together. And I think a lot of the stuff we've done so far took the shape it did because when Substack launched and said, hey, we've got this new comic thing happening, as far as I know, there wasn't anyone who was prepared or had like, we have all this material ready to go. We knew that we were starting a company. It was just, hey, in 2 weeks, are you ready to start a company? And it's like, sure, okay, but what are we putting up? You know, so I think a lot of the process stuff at the beginning was just going, we're just in the process of making this stuff right now. And it's you're either going to wait months to see like the finished comics come out, or, you know, we're just going to make this the whole thing. Like you're just going to come along with us for the whole process and see it built from like the ground up. And thankfully people have really responded to that. Like people have found that pretty exciting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think part of it is just the timing of just this thing just happened just out of the blue. And we were just, you know, go.
And that's the thing is like the Substack Pro grant is what allows you guys to do this stuff. Because normally,
yes,
that's the thing I don't think people really think of when they look at what you all are doing is everything you're doing to a certain degree would be considered untouchable luxuries in the normal comic making world. Because it's like, could you imagine just being like, hey, you know, Marvel or whomever, I need a year so I can design all these characters and build up this world? They'd be like, no, you got to draw the comic. And
yeah,
I think that's the interesting thing is that part that you wouldn't normally be able to do is your entire job right now. Is it exciting to get to like focus so much on these elements of comics that are so often sacrificed at the altar of deadlines? We'll start with you, Huddleston.
Oh, definitely. I mean, this is everything about this job has been a luxury that at least especially in like, you know, the big two, you don't get that at all. Like maybe you'll get like, I think in the past, maybe I'd get like a week to, you know, draw some characters up, you know, at the most, you know, before I hit pages on something. But this sort of thing where it's like, no, you're just going to be developing stuff for months. You know, we are going to be handing it off, you know, to artists. So we are producing comics, but your job for months is just to design things. Oh God, it's heaven. This is like the best job I've ever had. It's very spoiling. I don't know what I'm going to do after that.
We got to draw comics after this.
Yeah.
Just gotta make it last forever.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. That would, yeah, we should. What happens at? Oh yeah, I guess we still got to design some more stuff after these short stories with our own stories.
Oh yeah. Don't. I was gonna say, don't be fooled. Even when we're working on our big projects that we're going to be doing, I guarantee you, we're still every week. It's still going to be. We need a design for this. We need a design for that. We need something for the shop. We need something for this convention. It's. We're going to be designing stuff every week. I guarantee you.
Yep.
Does it feel freeing to do it this way?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is like the closest I could put it to is, yeah, I feel like I'm like 9 years old again, drawing like, making up like cool characters from like my favorite like Image comics or X-Men comics, and just that's really what this whole designing thing is for me. I'm like, fuck. I'm like, there's nothing. It doesn't. I mean, it is work, but it feels the least amount of work that I've ever done. Working in this industry for like 11 years, so no, it's been awesome.
I think the only thing that makes it feel like work is just the amount of stuff that needs to be done.
Yeah.
We're like, this is a lot of fun, but I've got a week to design, kind of a little universe for this short story, and I need to have these, I need to have something that's presentable to an artist where they could work from this. So I think that's the only part that even resembles work, is you're just having to do a ton of it.
I thought an interesting point you brought up, Huddleston, in the write-up for The Job, was that The Job was the first time one of you had revisited characters. And so, like, that means that you're just constantly having to design, because it's like, one of the nice things, like, let's say you were drawing, like, an X-Men book or something like that. Cyclops is going to look like what Cyclops looks like. Wolverine's going to look like what Wolverine's going to look like, et cetera, et cetera. You just come back to the same designs that have existed. This one, it's like you've done that once, and you've been working on it for visual, like, from what we know, like 8 months. And that's amazing.
Yeah. Each short story, and I don't think anyone anticipated this when we started, but like each short story is almost doing like a movie, because each one takes place on a different, the script will come in and I'll read through it, or Mike will read through it, and if it's big enough, we'll split up the designs, and so we'll have this list of like, okay, for this 8-page story, here's the 5 characters that need to be designed. Here's the 3 locations who need these 2 vehicles. And then here's like these 3 or 4 props. And it's like designing a movie for, and usually we have like a week to do maybe one of those. So it's a lot. It's a lot to do. And having a revisit of the characters has been really exciting, just like I was saying on the editorial side, because we get to see these characters develop. And you may have seen them on a spaceship. Now you're seeing them on a pirate ship, and you're really getting a chance to see these characters evolve, which is the point.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on the design side, it's just been a lot of raw creation, like for each new thing.
Del Mundo, it's funny, because when we talked for that art feature we did where it was interviews, it was just like an interview about your covers. It was funny because at the end we talked about how like you were considering doing like creator-owned stuff, and you're talking about how like what you were saying earlier, where it's like you want to kind of get back to like creating things like when you were a kid and like get into that stuff. It was funny because looking back on it now, and I think we talked a fair amount before 3 Worlds, 3 Moons was announced, but it seems like you must have been already working on it, because you were effectively talking about this, it seems. Was that the case?
I think like it was just in the I don't think I was working on it, but I think we were just in a process of talking about it.
Yeah.
Like I probably got an email from Jonathan and was like, got something for you, Well, maybe I like put it into the universe while we were talking. But yeah, that's exactly what happened. So like, I guess I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
After we talked.
Please tell me that Jonathan actually approached you by saying, got something for you, because that is like the most minimal approach to a very maximal idea that I've ever heard in my entire life.
I believe from what I remember, it was like, what are you doing right now? I'm like, are you out of your contracts? I think I got something for you. And I just thought, yeah, okay, we're gonna like maybe we'll do like a book together or something, right? He comes back with like, yeah, we're creating this insane new universe, and here's a lot of money. So I'm just like, that was unexpected, and yeah, it's been a blessing in disguise for sure.
Do you feel like you two have dramatically different approaches to design? Like, do you learn from watching each other and like kind of how you build things up, or maybe like what you value as you do it?
I think so. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, the similar thing I think we have is that from I don't know, you can probably correct me on this, but is that we just for the most part we're very freeing in terms of what we want to do. In terms of the pages that we do, we're kind of just like, well, if I want to draw something painted here, I'll draw something painted. If I feel like this works better in line art, I'll do it in line art. And I think that we kind of have the same attitude in terms of that.
Yeah, I think so. I'd never even thought about that until right now, like our approach on the pages. But the fact that your pages make so much sense to me when I see them, I think it is because we have a very similar approach. On the design side, I think it's very different. And the only way I know it's different is because Mike will often turn designs in that I'm just like, where the hell did this come from? I'm like, how did he come up with this? You're like, and it's usually, and that's why I'm saying like I'm trying to push my stuff to be more imaginative, because like sometimes there's a real quirkiness in Del Mundo's designs that's just wonderful. Like it'll just be like the most delightful design that in a million years I would have never come up with something like that. And so I think that's part of what Jonathan's genius was about picking us both for this. And that's one of the things that I try to do. Like if there's a big enough script, I'm like, well, let's split the design chores on this. So like you may be designing 2 or 3 characters, I'm designing 2 or 3 characters, and we're getting both of our inputs, into one story. So we're getting the benefit of having these 2 different approaches kind of sit next to each other.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't understand how Mike thinks or designs stuff or makes stuff, but it's always fantastic when it shows up.
I always think you guys are like magicians with the way you work, and I'm glad to hear that you also feel like that.
Yeah,
definitely. I think we just have different aesthetics, and we have just we work differently in that sense, so that we're both surprising ourselves. Because when I get, it's the same thing when I get designs from Mike, when he hands them in, the same idea. It's like, how did you come up with that sweater? Like I would, like that's not how I would have drawn that jacket. I love that jacket, by the way. I don't know what you're talking about, but the one in the job.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. The puffy jacket with the cut off waist.
Oh, the one from the assassin.
Yeah. And I'm just like, it's not what I would have chosen to do. Like if I were to draw that, I probably would have taken the jacket and like made it longer or something. But in seeing that, I'm like, man, I gotta get on this shorter version. It looks awesome with longer sleeves. So it's like all that stuff is just like feeding off of each other's designs. And yeah.
One of the fun things we've got to do a couple of times so far, and we're going to get to do it more, is I've had a chance to illustrate some of his designs, and like in some of the stuff we're doing right now, Mike's done an illustrated version of a scene that I originally drew, and that's been really fun to like have us do our take on each other's designs or each other's work, and that's been really interesting. I don't know. I think the whole thing's going to benefit from having these 2 different approaches in one universe.
Yeah. I imagine so. I can totally see what you're talking about when it comes to like the personality of Del Mundo's stuff, Huddleston. But there's this one in the Arboteco process. Like I mentioned earlier, like Del Mundo, how you would do like the breathing apparatus for Tayo Vayar. And I love like the fact that you hand wrote notes on it. And like you're saying, oh snap, what if it eventually grows into a cape? Like things like that. That's like kind of like the personality stuff, because both, you can literally see the thought in there, but then you start to realize like, oh my God, like this, what is this guy doing? Like, this is crazy. I do, one thing I think is interesting is you're building a universe fundamentally. And so you have kind of different, approaches, or not necessarily approaches, but like aesthetics and like value systems to a certain degree. But when you're dealing with the same planet, or if you're dealing with the same people or something like that, do you have rules that you need to follow, or is it more free flowing than that? Like, do you want like people to look, or not necessarily people to look a certain way, but like maybe their clothing would be similar or something like that?
I think we try our best. Like, I mean, there is a story that we have worked on. Can we tell them that story, Mike?
I don't know which one you're thinking of.
Like the kind of like the space age, like our long form story, the Valors.
Something coming up.
Yeah, something coming up. I don't know how much we want to say.
Okay, there's something coming up where me and Mike did have to. I mean, we did our designs alone, but then as we were like putting it up on our meetings, I started to take from his designs to make sure that my designs kind of went with his, because we're basically drawing a family that had to kind of. I guess we could have done some different designs, but we wanted something to be very uniform in a way. And it had that space age, silver age sci-fi feel. So with that, for sure, we were conscious of making sure things are, we're right.
Yeah, there are no rules though so far. It's just really however much we want stuff to hang together.
Yeah.
Like one of the stories we have out right now, that we both did some concept stuff for. I had a situation where a character pulls a gun and shoots someone in a situation, and to me, in the environment, I'm like, well, this feels like this guy is a military guy or some sort of security thing. And so I just designed him to be a military guy in that story. And when I was talking to Mike, he had already designed guards that kind of existed in the same world. So I'm like, okay, so I just found his designs. And when I was designing this new character, since I decided he was a military guy, I just riffed off of Mike's designs to build this character. And that does happen. And anytime that we can do that, I think it's cool. Again, just to weave everything together, and it's fun to play with, the design elements that Mike came up with on something else. But there's no rules. This is really just you do your designs, I do my designs, and along the way, if we can pick up little details and weave stuff back and forth that we like, then we will. But if we end up creating like a couple different, if they look like they're different from different planets, but they both exist in this story, I guess we're just hoping on the artists who's drawing this, their hand to kind of like smooth over some of those differences. It's like someone else is going to be drawing all this, so it's going to have some sort of cohesive thing just through that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty loose.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it seems like the source book is almost kind of like the backbone, and like you can kind of improvise off of that to a certain degree. It's not hard and fast, like you have to do this. It's you could do this, or like this is a foundation you can build off of, but you can build something else out of that foundation. And now, a quick word from one of off-panel sponsors. That sponsor's Bad Idea. Bad Idea paid for the sponsorship, but they won't give me anything to promote since they're over. So here I am saying the name Bad Idea. Contractually. I have to. That's it. Bad Idea. They're a thing, I guess. And now, back to the show. Obviously, Jonathan's an artist in his own right. How much do you talk visuals with him? Is that pretty much your domain as the art department, or do you all talk a fair bit?
I would say, unless he has a very, very specific idea, 90% of the time, not really any conversation about the visuals at all. I mean, it's really us just handing stuff in. And again, it's my experience from Decorum. I just hand stuff in, and unless there's something just completely off-road, he's just like, great. That's it.
I love it.
He's been really, like, in this process, and me and Mike's process of visualizing stuff, yeah, he's been pretty open to everything. He'll riff off whatever we design sometimes for the stories that he makes. But we are involved in the visual, like he's very involved in visuals when we talk about artists and what kind of color is to use, or
That's
what
true.
their favorite artists are and stuff like that. He really gets into it. Like he really knows he has a high knowledge of like art, because I guess that comes from him also being an artist. So he does have a certain aesthetic of what he likes as well.
That's true. Yeah, as an art director, I think I didn't think about that, but as an art director for almost everyone else, he can be pretty tough.
Yeah,
like he's got a very specific sense of what he likes, and I didn't really know that. We didn't have that many direct conversations when we were working on Decorum together, and I almost became retroactively anxious. I'm like, how did I get away with all that shit? Look, I didn't know that he really had such definite opinions about everything. So yeah, I guess that's weird. We're getting off easy, but I think a lot of other artists, he's just like, this is exactly what I want.
he has a pretty high vision of how he wants the universe in terms of not what me and Mike are doing, but he loves, like, for sure he loves design. He's a big like design guy. So, he designed the logo for Three Worlds. And he's really into like the aesthetics, like how this book's gonna look. And it's just down to like what kind of paper we're gonna use when we do the source book. He's very adamant on quality.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's, in terms of that stuff, he's very involved. Yeah.
You're making me feel very good about my choice to upgrade to a founder.
You're gonna get some premium stuff, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, this isn't gonna be like a half-ass hardcover. This is gonna be an ultra elite hardcover.
Yeah,
it's he's sending us all like books just to go, this is the paper stock I'm talking about. He's so he's very, I want this printer, and quality is like the first thing he's worried about. So which is again is spoiling. Like how great is it to be working with someone where his whole thing is just, how do we make the best shit possible?
Yeah.
That's spoiling.
He just wants to make sure that like people are getting the best quality, and also the cool thing is too is we have like almost like an in-house designer, Sasha, that's pretty much like doing like killer designs for this book. And so Jonathan has a very hard focus on just the look of it, how everything's going to look.
You're making a really intense concept universe comic when you have a designer who designs an entire language for the book.
Yeah. I was like, holy this is awesome. And then me and Mike have been using those letters like crazy on our concepts too.
Yeah.
It just makes it so much more like, yeah, this looks a little normal. I need to make it like a little off-world.
Just throw some Kreska on there.
Yeah.
So cool.
That is really cool. Okay, I just have a few more questions. I do want to ask really quick. You've mentioned this a couple times. Originally, it sounded like you guys were really involved with the process of figuring out who would draw these short stories. Then Steve came on. I don't know how much the process changed, but do you, what these worlds are going to look like. Artists. Are you part of that process of kind of casting and trying to find the right voices for that?
Yeah. Whenever we have, throughout the week, and especially when we have our meetings, there's always conversation about like, we have these stories, who are we interested in? Who should we reach out to? And we're still part of that process of just throwing out names. We like these colorists. We think these artists are great. Let's see if we can get this. But Steve now is the one who's actually doing the editor job of contacting those people, scheduling all that stuff. Which again, I don't know how we even did a couple months of this project without him being involved. It was crazy that we were trying to do all that stuff. So yeah, we pitch in, but now we have an actual professional who knows how to do the rest of it.
Yeah. It was cool at the start when Jonathan would be like, Guys, give me your favorite art, your dream list of artists you want to work with. We'll try to get them.
Oh my God.
That was fun.
Yeah.
We got some of those for sure.
That's amazing. Have you been surprised at all by the parts of the process you enjoy? You know, it's like, because this is so unusual. This isn't like making a normal comic. Is there anything in there where you actually dug into it and you're just like, I like this way more than I might have expected?
Yeah, the concept process.
Just like the design part?
Yeah, I didn't think that I was going to, because I thought, okay, design the universe, cool. Like, I'll design these characters and that should be fun. I didn't think that I would actually be putting in so many ideas towards these concepts that I was doing. Like when I was drawing, I was like, shit, I should have been doing this when I was, designing characters for, just say, Marvel, because you come up with so many ideas. And now, like when I get for our books that me and Mike are going to do with it, I think I'm going to stick with that process. I'll just do concepts first and then do the pages after, because I'll get like a million ideas just from those. And that character will become a lot more three-dimensional than what I would do. Because usually when I was doing stuff, before, when I was creating a character, I would just create it on the fly. Like I'd be drawing the book and almost just creating the character on the fly.
Mm-hmm.
This is different. This is more like we're really fleshing it out. And that's where I'm having all my fun. I didn't know that it was going to turn out to be like that. I thought I was just going to be drawing like a cool character, the visually, but now there's more to it. Like you're actually almost writing stuff within that character.
You get the jump off you like.
Yeah.
What about you, Huddleston?
Well, I think that, like Mike was saying, I think the design definitely, I've never done anything like this before. But I think the thing that surprised me that I never anticipated is seeing the art come back in from these stories. Like I've never been involved where like I contributed to something and then comic pages came in that were done by someone else.
Right.
Yeah. And it's surprising how fulfilling, that is when you're like, wow, that artist really just kicked ass on this script and these designs. Like that's been a surprise. Like I don't know, you get to be the first audience.
Yeah.
And you're strangely connected to this thing, even though you didn't draw it. So that's been cool.
Yeah, I forgot about that, but yeah, that's exactly that's the reward of all this is, you're drawing like these characters, but they're almost still, right? Like, dynamic mannequins basically. And then you're seeing these artists just taking those mannequins and making them move. Like it's almost like a 3D artist making like a model and then just seeing it move in CGI.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because it's like our job was pretty much just to create a, like a pose. These guys are putting them into like action scenes and like giving them like expressions and all that. And then you're like, so that's cool. Like, and I've always like, because Mike reminded me of it. I've always, whenever I did design a character for Marvel, I was always looking forward to seeing what, people do something with it. And I've only done that maybe like once or twice. And I wished for more of it. And now it's like everything that we design is, it's like on steroids now.
Yeah. That's like everything you do.
And by the way, I'm really happy that you said in that interview with Christian Ward that he was like, it was great to get all those designs. Because I've not really talked to anyone, that's done, one of these stories for us yet. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, I hope this isn't annoying to artists to get, here's a script and here's this entire pack of reference and designs. I've never been in that situation, so I just didn't know how it would feel as an artist to be on the receiving end of getting all that information. So if artists are enjoying that, that's kind of a relief, and that's great.
I will say, I think it's really interesting that so much of your normal role has been almost like inverted in some ways, because listening to you talk about getting the pages in Huddleston, it reminds me, like, I see writers tweet all the time or like, posts on social media like all the time about like my favorite part about the job is getting pages in. And like, you've never done that. You were the providers of the pages.
Yeah.
Now it's
yeah.
like so much of your role has been like, you're still in it in the same capacity to a certain degree, but you're now coming at it from a different perspective, and you're getting to appreciate all these parts of the job that you never got to do before, which I think is great.
Yeah, it's really cool. Like I'm thankful all the time that Jonathan pulled me in on this, because I feel like the parts of the job that I'm touching now, it's just, it's much, much bigger than I ever imagined I would get to do on a project. And all this extra stuff it's cool. Yeah, it's really cool to be a part of all these other things.
I remember when we do get pages in, I'm just like, oh, this is what it feels like. Wow. Because like, I'll get pages in and I'm just like smiling. I'm like, oh man, like this is really how this is what I've been doing, I guess, when I send in pages. It's pretty awesome, man.
Yeah.
Really, yeah.
Well, to close, I have some larger things to bring up. There's lots of expansion going on with Three Worlds, Three Moons. We mentioned earlier, Steve Wacker is on as the EIC. Lots of products and new comics on the horizon. You guys are finishing up the source book and everything like that. Have partnerships with Zoop and whatnot. Probably more things than we don't even know. I keep running across ad campaigns for you guys on social media, like, trying to get people to subscribe. How does that feel from the inside? Does it feel like during this expansion phase and as you're doing all this stuff, does it feel like you're really building something special, or is you just doing so much stuff that it's hard to think about it like that?
I think we're confronted with like the specialness of what we're making every day, just again, because our work experience is so different, and the parts where, we're saying the parts we get to contribute to, it's so different. When it comes to like the ads and all that stuff, again, like we're a very small team. So like we're part of all those, we're the ones behind, making those decisions. And
right.
When we're having our conversations, our conversations will just be a list of like, we're picking artists, and then we're picking printers, and then we're talking about schedule, and then now we have to design ads, and it's just, and now we're talking about, stuff for our shop and different content. I don't think it's happening so fast that we can't see what we're making, but there is a lot. Like every day there is like 20 different things that we're having to do because we are the whole business.
Right.
Ads and everything.
Every day, like there's always something new that gets added to our process. So it does feel more and more that this is, something really special. I mean, it already started that way, but it gets bigger every time we add something new to it.
One of the things I think is interesting, I remember after the Substack stuff came up, I had Heidi McDonald on from The Beat, and she said something along the lines of like, she doesn't expect it to last. And I think that was, like a lot of times in comics, like these types of, well, I don't want to say a lot of times things like Substack comes up, because it's not very often that people show up with a bunch of money and say, do whatever you want. It's a pretty rare thing in comics. But I mean, yes. New ventures come up, and there can be skepticism surrounding it. But I think that's one of the things that all of your expansion reflects is like, this is not a short-term thing. You guys are building something. And I think that that's one of the things that's really interesting is like, maybe the idea of a concept universe when it was first introduced was a little foreign, because we were just like, we've never experienced this type of thing in comics before. But now you're starting to get some clarity, and you're also starting to get clarity that this is not just a small thing. I mean, you guys are going to be making your first public appearances as a crew at C2E2 in Emerald City, and like Reed Pop is like pummeling me and trying to tell me that this is happening. I'm like, I'm already going, guys. Come on, what are you doing? But anyways, it's just interesting. It feels like something that's very real, and something that's, not something that's going to be short term. It's going to be something you guys are working on for a long time. And I think that's one of the interesting things is maybe it was hard to see exactly what this would look like at the start, but now as an outsider, it's really starting to come into, you can see it. And I think it's pretty amazing.
Oh, good. I think especially once we have some of our books printed, once there's actual physical, collections of all the stuff that we're making that people have in their hands, I think it'll become much more clear just with that, having a book in front of you.
Yeah.
As far as it lasting, and I mean, who knows, but I don't know, philosophy for this stuff is if someone gives you a chance, to jump on stage, you just have to kick ass. You just have to give it everything you've got, while you're up there. And so I think all of us kind of realize how fortunate we are, that the Substack thing happened, that this is a crazy, thing to have happened at all. And so we're going to do our best to make the coolest stuff that we can. And as long as it lasts is as long as it lasts.
Yeah.
What else can you do?
Yeah. And I think our working relationship has been amazing as well. So,
yeah.
If I could do this forever, the way we're doing it, I'm cool with that,
Yeah.
It really is like it's like, man, I get to draw cool shit. I get to create stories around these characters. No one says no to me.
Yeah.
I got one of the best artists, like, as a partner, one of the greatest writers, like, come on, man. Like, it's pretty crazy.
What more could you ask for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I love it. Well, guys, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to me about Three Worlds, Three Moons, designing new concept universes, dynamic mannequins, which will almost certainly be the name of this podcast because I thought it was the best phrase I've ever heard. Thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Well, thank
All
you.
right.
Man.
Thanks, David.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artists Mike Del Mundo and Mike Huddleston. You can find their work on the Three Worlds, Three Moons Substack at 3w3m.substack.com. Love Off Panel and want to support it? Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts today and give the show a rating or review while you're at it, but 5 stars only. You can also support the show by backing on Patreon. Find the show at patreon.com/offpanel. And when you back it on there, you get early access to each week's podcast as well as weekly content and more. Want even more? Subscribe to my subscription comic site Sketched at sketch.com for long-form articles, interviews, and the rest of the site's content and its members-only forum. You can find Off Panel and Sketched on social media by liking it on Facebook at /Sketched. That's SKTCHD. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at @SketchComic or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Ben Damstead, Cameron Brown, Ron B, Devin Fitzsimons, Nick Walker, Patrick Coyle, Isaac Warren, Scott Carpenter, Rent Narb Studios Comics, Capes and Tights Podcast, Klaus Van de Ven, Brian, Submet Industries, Raj Patel, Jack Mulqueen, Kyle, Carl Kerschel, Robert Masella, Elza Chartier, Luke Nakashoji, Elliot Metz, Dr. Luke, Scott Hazelwood, Scott Buwan, Michael Tunk, Canadian by Proxy, Johnny Cannon, Bradley Rader, Carl Choi, Brandon DePillis, Patrick Brower, Declan Shalvey, Dan Guarino, Josh Williamson, Adam Freeman, Ben Wild, Brian Klein Q, SB, Nick Bennett, Daniel Whitfield, Susanna Polo, Reed Hinkley Barnes, Mario Tiambang, Andrew Carita, Matt Mahoney, Charlie Chu, Stephen Hall, Pensacola Pop Comics, Kim Eslin, Philip Myra, Christian Shelton, Kenny Porter, Chris Pacello, Torin Grumbeck, Fuzz Bubbles, Christopher Todd, Transmitter Down, Waltz Comics and Books, Carl Mizell, Paul Slates, Akil Wilson, Alex Dimitriopoulos, Terry Dodson, Wesley Giff, Sean Kirkham, Alistair Ross, Julio Anta, Brett A. Schmidt, Jason Goodmanson, Paul Reinwan, Vita Ayala, Tara Ferguson, Dave Slusher, WMQ Comics, Akil, Kokachi, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Seavey, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Plato, Brendan Fletcher, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Assey, Adam Bogart, Matthew Taylor, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Nick Hall, Bjorn Basin, John Hendricks, Steve Anderson, Ian Maxwell, Cliff Chang, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Adam Highfield, Fiona Staples, Mark Abbott, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim Demonakos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comic Star in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to Upright T-Rex Music, who wrote and performed Off Panel's theme song just for the show. Check out their music on Spotify because it's completely delightful. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.